I discovered my husband had been cheating on me with a family friend, but their intimate emails were just the beginning of the story. Hello, I'm Emily, and I'm about to share a journey that turned my seemingly perfect suburban life into a saga marked by deception, heartbreak, and eventual redemption. Until last year, my life resembled a well-tended garden, orderly, blooming, and predictably serene. I taught English at the local high school, enjoyed minor fame as a community theater actress, and was married to Mark, an architect whose calm demeanor balanced my more spirited nature. Together, we navigated the waters of parenting two wonderful children, Mia and Noah, in our beloved townhouse on Sullivan Street. Our home was a gathering place, a haven of warmth and laughter, where friends and family were frequent guests, and life's minor dramas seemed like the stuff of book club debates rather than our reality. But beneath this harmonious surface, seeds of discord had been sown, waiting for the right moment to break through the soil and disrupt the tranquility of our lives. As summer gave way to the crisp edges of fall, our family settled into the comfortable rhythm of school routines and weekend soccer games. Mark's architecture firm was thriving, often sending him on short trips to nearby cities, while I juggled teaching with directing the fall play. Life on Sullivan Street was picturesque, our routines untroubled by the shadows creeping along the edges of our marriage. However, subtle signs began to emerge, though I initially dismissed them as the byproducts of a busy life. Mark became more guarded with his phone, his laughter a bit forced, and his smiles not quite reaching his eyes. Conversations about his day grew vague, and his business trips became more frequent. Looking back, the clues were there, like breadcrumbs leading back to a truth I was too naive, or too unwilling, to see. It was a typical Thursday evening when the facade began to crack. I was setting the table for dinner, the kids were finishing their homework, and Mark was supposedly working late again. But a call from a colleague, asking for a document Mark had left at home, sent me to his study, a room that suddenly felt as unfamiliar as the man I thought I knew. Searching through his desk, I found not just the document, but a stack of receipts for jewelry I had never received, hotel stays in our city, and dinners at restaurants we had never visited together. My heart raced as the reality began to set in, each receipt a confirmation of my growing dread. I confronted Mark when he returned home that night. The man who walked through the door was a stranger, his usual warmth replaced by a cool detachment. The conversation that followed was a mix of allegations and denial, tears and disbelief. Mark stood firm that he didn't have any affairs and that the receipts were not his own, but his friend Jacob's, who had asked to keep them so as not to spoil the surprise for his girlfriend. Which one, thought I. But in the end, when I hadn't anything to say and couldn't think straight, Mark simply left, murmuring something about having nothing to add as he'd already explained, and it was my trouble. I didn't find his words reassuring. I remember watching him getting into the car and driving away, as if I was seeing my cozy life off. The aftermath of that night was devastating. As I struggled to understand where the truth was, our home became a silent battleground. Mia and Noah sensed the change, their laughter replaced by whispered conversations and uneasy glances. I realized then that the storm Mark and I had brought into our home was not just ours to weather. It was a tempest that threatened to sweep up our innocent children in its wake. We remained family. Mark still kissed me goodbye when he was leaving for work, but the scars of that night never left. As fall deepened into winter, the warmth that had once filled our home on Sullivan Street grew colder by the day. The trust and love that had blossomed over years were now frostbitten, wilted by lies and neglect. It was in this cold new reality that I found myself grappling with decisions about our future. Separation? Divorce? Or was I just overthinking, and those checks truly were not Mark's, and I was essentially ruining our family for nothing? In the weeks that followed, as I navigated my shattered life and the practicalities of dissolving a marriage, I learned of my grandmother's passing and the inheritance that would open old family wounds and reveal secrets that had been buried for decades. But that part of the story, and the unexpected paths it would lead me down, was still to come. Next update. The day that turned my life upside down began like any other, but with a slight chill in the air that hinted at the coming winter. It was a Saturday morning, and Sullivan Street was quiet, wrapped in the kind of stillness that speaks more of exhaustion than peace. The kids were at a sleepover, and I had the house to myself, a rarity I cherished. I decided to use the time to organize some of our cluttered spaces, starting with the home office Mark and I shared, a space once filled with collaborative energy, but now just another room holding secrets. As I sifted through drawers and cabinets, rearranging books and files, my hand brushed against an envelope tucked away in the back of a drawer. It was unmarked and looked innocuous enough, but when I pulled it out, I felt an immediate sense of dread. It was heavy, weighed down with more than just paper. Hesitantly, I opened it, and as I pulled out the stack of printed emails and photographs, the morning light seemed to dim, each piece a tangible fragment of betrayal. The emails were exchanges between Mark and Clara, not just platonic or professional, but deeply personal, intimate messages that chronicled an affair that had been going on not for months, but for years. The photographs showed them together in various places we had visited as a family, smiling with a happiness that now twisted my stomach. Each discovery was a blow, dismantling the life I thought we had built together, piece by piece. I sat on the floor of our office, surrounded by the debris of my shattered trust, trying to breathe through the pain. Hours passed, the silence of the house amplifying the chaos in my mind. When Mark finally came home, finding me amidst the scattered proof of his infidelity, the look on his face was one I'd never seen before. It was fear, regret, and something akin to relief, as if part of him was glad the deception was over. His confession poured out in a torrent of words that seemed to fill the room with a palpable sadness. Clara, he explained, had started as a friend, a confidant, then something more. He spoke of loneliness, of disconnection, of finding in her a spark that he felt had dimmed between us. It was no excuse, he knew that, but in his telling, it was a way to make sense of something so senseless. And those bloody jewelry checks were indeed his. The confrontation was long and fraught, with tears and recriminations on both sides. I asked him to leave, needing space to process the immensity of what had just come to light. That night, I was alone in our bed for the first time in years, the silence oppressive, the betrayal a physical ache that seemed to consume the room. The following days were a blur of emotion. When Mia and Noah returned, I did my best to shield them from the worst of the storm, but children have a way of sensing when their world has shifted. Mia, ever perceptive, asked me outright if something was wrong with Daddy. The pain in her eyes as I struggled to find the words was a reminder of how many lives were being affected by this upheaval. Mark's affair, now out in the open, set in motion a series of events that I could never have predicted. Friends and family chose sides, some offering support, others withdrawing, uncomfortable with the messiness of our disintegrating marriage. Clara, once a close friend, became a figure of scorn in my mind, her betrayal almost worse than Mark's. As the weeks turned into months, the divorce proceedings began. Legal battles over assets and custody loomed large, but more daunting was the emotional toll it was taking on everyone involved. Mark and I, who had once promised to support each other, in good times and in bad, found ourselves on opposite sides of a courtroom, our communication reduced to terse emails and mediated conversations through lawyers. This part of my journey was filled with lessons about love and loss, about the complexity of human relationships, and about the resilience required to rebuild a life from the ashes of despair. It was a chapter marked by pain, but also by growth, a painful stepping stone to a future I hoped would be brighter. As this tumultuous chapter in my life unfolded, another twist awaited me, a legacy from my past that would uncover secrets long buried and bring with them a new set of challenges and revelations. But that story, the next part of my journey, would start with a phone call that came on a crisp autumn morning, just when I thought I had faced all the surprises my life could throw at me. Next update. The initial shock of Mark's infidelity morphed into a slow, simmering anger as the reality of our fractured marriage settled around me like a heavy fog. Despite the overwhelming urge to shut down, I had to face the logistical nightmare of disentangling our lives. My primary concern was protecting Mia and Noah from the storm that was breaking over our family. They were confused and hurt, and every decision I made had to consider the impact on their young lives. The house felt cavernous and empty in the weeks that followed. Conversations with Mark were curt, conducted over text or quick tense phone calls, primarily discussing logistical arrangements for the kids or answering unavoidable questions about finances. The depth of my betrayal made even the most mundane interactions painful, every word a reminder of what we had lost. I struggled to maintain a semblance of normalcy for the kids. Mia became my shadow, her once vibrant demeanor now subdued and watchful. Noah, younger and less able to articulate his feelings, showed his distress through nightmares and a newfound anxiety about being left alone. I enlisted the help of a child psychologist to guide them through the upheaval, and many nights were spent reassuring them, holding them until sleep overtook their worried whispers. As the reality of divorce began to solidify, Mark moved out of our home on Sullivan Street, taking up residence in a nearby apartment. The physical distance was a relief, but it did little to ease the emotional proximity, the constant reminders of his presence in town, the shared custody weekends, and the inevitable run-ins at school functions or the grocery store. It was during one particularly hard week, when the weight of single parenthood began to truly settle on my shoulders, that I received a call from the lawyer handling my late grandmother's estate. I hadn't seen my grandmother, Helen, in years. Our family connections had frayed after a series of bitter disputes over her handling of family matters. Her voice, once so familiar and stern, had become just another echo from the past, until now. "Emily, your grandmother passed away last month," the lawyer informed me, his voice formal and detached. "She left behind quite a substantial estate, and to everyone's surprise, you are listed as the primary beneficiary. There's also a portion allotted to an undisclosed party, described only in terms of a private trust." This news jolted me out of my stupor. My relationship with Helen had been complex. She was a formidable woman, whose expectations had often weighed heavily on me. We had parted on less than amicable terms, with unresolved words and unexpressed grievances lingering between us. Dealing with her estate meant diving back into family dynamics I had long avoided. It also meant facing parts of my past I had neatly boxed away. The more I delved into Helen's affairs, the more I uncovered layers of secrecy that seemed to mirror the deceit I was unraveling in my own life. Helen had been a keeper of secrets, much like Mark, and her legacy was a puzzle that demanded solving. As I sifted through old letters and documents, a clearer picture began to emerge of the woman Helen was and the burdens she had carried. Among the papers, I found references to a secret lover, an affair that had spanned decades, hidden from the public eye. The parallels between her life and mine were unnerving, each revelation a mirror reflecting my own pain. The inheritance became a double-edged sword, offering financial relief, but also dragging me back into the world of family politics. My parents, already distant, viewed my newfound inheritance with suspicion and jealousy, complicating our interactions. The undisclosed party mentioned in the will turned out to be the son of Helen's longtime lover, a fact that only served to stir up old resentments and spark new conflicts within the family. As I navigated the legal and emotional minefield of my grandmother's legacy, I was forced to confront questions about love, loyalty, and the legacies we leave behind. The process was cathartic in some ways, forcing me to deal with my grief for Helen and my anger at Mark simultaneously. It was a period of intense personal growth, fraught with challenges, but also filled with moments of unexpected understanding and forgiveness. But let me tell you about all of this step by step. Next update. The weeks following the discovery of my grandmother Helen's will were a whirlwind of legal consultations, family meetings, and deep personal reflection. I had to grapple not only with my impending divorce, but also with the complicated inheritance left behind by Helen. The revelation that part of her estate was entrusted to the son of her secret lover added layers of complexity to our already strained family dynamics. In the midst of these challenges, the divorce proceedings with Mark began to heat up. Our lawyers exchanged documents laden with accusations and demands, each email and phone call increasing the distance between the life we had shared and the separate futures we were now forging. As the legal battles unfolded, the tension spilled over into our home life. The kids, caught in the middle, struggled to adjust to the new normal of divided weekends and holiday schedules. Mia's grades began to slip, and Noah's quiet moments were often interrupted by sudden bouts of tears. The stress of managing the divorce and the estate took a toll on my mental health. Sleepless nights were spent poring over legal papers or walking through the silent halls of our home, where memories lurked in every corner. My own grief was compounded by the responsibility I felt to protect my children from the fallout. It was during one of these sleepless nights that I decided to reach out to a therapist, seeking help not only for Mia and Noah but for myself. Therapy sessions became a refuge, a place to unpack the layers of betrayal and loss without judgment. As I worked through my emotions, I learned to articulate the pain of Mark's betrayal and the shock of Helen's hidden life. The therapist guided me through exercises in forgiveness, not for Mark or Helen, but for myself, for the misplaced guilt and the buried anger I had carried for too long. The emotional clarity gained from therapy provided a new perspective on my legal battles. I approached the divorce negotiations with a firmer grasp of what was at stake, prioritizing the well-being of Mia and Noah over winning against Mark. This shift in perspective led to a breakthrough in our mediation sessions. We began to communicate more constructively, setting aside our grievances to focus on co-parenting our children. It wasn't easy, but each small step towards understanding felt like a victory. Parallel to the divorce, the management of Helen's estate introduced me to family secrets that spanned generations. I delved deeper into her diaries and letters, uncovering not just the facts of her affair, but the emotional journey she had endured. Helen's writings revealed a woman torn between duty and desire, her decisions shaped by the same fears and hopes that I found reflected in my own life. Understanding her struggles helped me reconcile with the grandmother I had once adored and then bitterly resented. The legal resolution of Helen's estate was another battleground. Family meetings often ended in arguments, old wounds reopened with each discussion of her legacy. But armed with a deeper understanding of her life, I found the strength to advocate for her wishes and for the acknowledgement of her long-hidden son. This process, painful as it was, slowly began to mend the fractured ties within our family as we collectively faced the truths that Helen had concealed. As the months passed, the contours of my new life began to take shape. The divorce was finalized, leaving me with a mixture of relief and sorrow. The settlement was fair, and Mark and I slowly found a rhythm in our co-parenting that allowed Mia and Noah some semblance of stability. Meanwhile, the resolution of Helen's estate closed a chapter on a past filled with secrets, allowing us to start afresh, albeit with more understanding and less innocence. In navigating these twin legal battles, I had traversed the darkest valleys of my heart and emerged not unscathed, but stronger and more self-aware. I learned that the law can wield a heavy hammer, but the human heart seeks a gentler justice, one rooted in forgiveness and the hope of redemption. As I closed the door on this tumultuous chapter of my life, I was ready to step into a future where I could write my own story, informed by the past, but not bound by it. Final update. As the dust settled on my divorce from Mark, the challenge of managing Helen's estate loomed large, carrying with it the weight of unresolved family history and freshly unearthed secrets. Helen had been a complex figure in my life, both admired and feared, loved and resented. The inheritance she left behind forced me into a deeper exploration of her legacy, prompting me to confront the fractures within my own family. The task of sorting through Helen's possessions was both cathartic and overwhelming. Her home was a treasure trove of her life's memories, old photographs, letters, and personal belongings that painted a picture of a woman much more nuanced than the grandmother I thought I knew. Each item I unearthed felt like a piece of a puzzle, gradually forming a clearer image of Helen's secret life and the choices she made that rippled through generations. Amidst these personal effects, I discovered a series of letters and journals that Helen had kept over the years. These writings revealed the depth of her relationship with her secret lover, a man named Richard, whose existence was unknown to our family until the reading of the will. Helen's words were filled with passion and regret, describing a love that sustained her, yet kept her isolated from those she loved. This revelation forced me to reconsider the narratives I had grown up with about Helen. Her stern demeanor and strict expectations had often been a source of tension, but her journals showed a woman divided between her duties and desires, much like the conflicts I had faced in my own life. This parallel drew me closer to Helen, bridging the gap between my memories and her reality. The legal aspect of settling Helen's estate was complicated by the introduction of Richard's son, whom she had named in her will. This man, Michael, was around my age, and his sudden inclusion in our family affairs stirred up a mix of skepticism and curiosity among my relatives. Some family members questioned the validity of his claim, while others, myself included, felt a strange kinship with him, another person marked by Helen's hidden decisions. Negotiating the inheritance became a delicate dance of family politics and legal maneuvering. Meetings with lawyers and family members often ended in heated debates or strained silences. Yet, through this process, I learned valuable lessons about compassion and the importance of understanding. Michael, despite his unconventional entry into our lives, showed a quiet strength and a desire to connect with the family he never knew he had. His presence challenged us to expand our notions of family and forgiveness. The resolution of the estate took months, but it was during this time that I began to truly heal from my divorce and the betrayal I had felt. The act of piecing together Helen's life, of giving voice to her silenced love, allowed me to find a new purpose in my own journey. I worked to mend the broken ties within my family, advocating for transparency and healing. As the final documents were signed and Helen's assets distributed, I felt a sense of closure, not just for myself, but for Helen too. The estate, once a symbol of her hidden pain, became a testament to the power of uncovering the truth, no matter how painful. It allowed our family to confront our shared past, to discuss openly what had once been shrouded in secrecy, and ultimately, to forgive the imperfections that make us human. As the winter thawed into spring, life on Sullivan Street began to feel somewhat normal again. The finalization of Helen's estate had brought closure, and my relationships with my family, particularly with Michael, had grown stronger. My children, Mia and Noah, were adjusting well to the new family dynamics, and my own heart was healing, the raw edges of betrayal slowly smoothing over with time and reflection. Yet, as history has often shown us, when we least expect it, life can throw us back into the throes of chaos. It was a brisk March morning when the phone rang with news that would once again test the strength and resilience of our family. The call was from a woman claiming to be Richard's daughter from another relationship, introducing herself as Sarah. Her voice trembled as she explained that her father had recently passed away, and among his possessions, she had found letters and documents that linked her to Helen. Sarah's revelation was a jolt out of the blue, reigniting old questions about the depth of Helen's secret life. She requested a meeting, hoping to connect with the family she never knew she had. Despite the shock, my newfound role as a mediator in my family's complex legacy prompted me to agree. I saw in Sarah's voice the same need for belonging and answers that Michael had when he first reached out. The meeting was set for a small cafe in town. Michael joined me, his presence a comforting reminder of how we had navigated similar revelations together. Sarah was already there when we arrived, her anxious eyes scanning every face. As we introduced ourselves, I noticed a mix of Michael's features in her, the same sharp eyes, the same nervous smile. Our conversation began with cautious exchanges, but soon delved into deeper, more emotional territories. Sarah shared her story, her upbringing by a single mother, her father's sporadic presence, and her struggle with his recent death. The documents she brought were a mix of photos, letters, and a diary, Helen's diary, one that I had never seen among her possessions. The diary contained entries that confirmed another layer to Helen's affair with Richard, one that involved not just passion, but profound love and pain. The diary's revelations were difficult to process. Helen had written about her fear of the consequences if her secret ever came to light, her desire to protect the children she loved from the truth, and her deep, enduring love for Richard. It was a love that had sustained her, but also isolated her, a secret garden where she had found solace from the judgments of the world. As we absorbed the weight of Helen's words, Sarah's next revelation struck an even harder blow. She revealed that Richard had been in contact with Helen up until her last days, that they had planned to reveal everything themselves, but death had parted them too soon. This news, while shocking, painted a tragic picture of two souls forever entwined, yet eternally divided by circumstance. The meeting ended with mixed feelings. While the past couldn't be changed, the future held potential for reconciliation and new connections. As Michael and I drove back, we discussed the implications of bringing Sarah into the family fold, of honoring Helen and Richard's memory by acknowledging all their descendants. The following months were a time of adjustment, as Sarah gradually became part of our lives. The process was not without its challenges, as old wounds had to be revisited and new understandings forged. Yet, through it all, our family's capacity for forgiveness and growth shone brightly. However, just as summer began to warm the edges of Sullivan Street once again, another unexpected drama unfolded. Mark, who had been a peripheral figure since our divorce, reached out with a request to reconnect. He had been doing a lot of soul-searching, he said, and therapy had opened his eyes to the mistakes and choices that had led to our family's breakdown. He wanted a chance to apologize, to make amends not just to me, but to Mia and Noah, who still felt the sting of his actions. This request brought a flood of old emotions back to the surface. Could someone who had caused so much pain be granted a path back into the heart of the family he had once betrayed? Was forgiveness possible, or even desirable, on such a scale? As I pondered these questions, I realized that the journey of healing was far from over. Each step forward seemed to reveal new paths, each decision branched into new possibilities. The road was not straight nor easy, but it was ours to travel, with all its unexpected turns and hidden vistas. And so, with cautious optimism, I agreed to meet Mark, to hear him out. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the story of Sullivan Street was far from finished.